I can hardly wait for this meeting to begin, guys. There's a lot of stuff going on in the news right now, but I think that the biggest story of the day has to be this headline I just saw, and I haven't had a chance to read the details, but I wanted to bring it to our audience as quickly as possible, that Mark Sanford has suspended his campaign for the Republican nomination for the presidency. Man.
I'll always remember where I was when I heard the news.
Who saw that coming?
Mike Sanford?
Yes, as Sanford said, Elizabeth, this is the big one. So
these creeps who jump in the race just to try and be a spoiler, and they can't even accomplish that little.
You know, if you're going to be a spoiler, be a good one.
That's right.
I have such terrible mixed feelings about Mark Sanford because I saw him speak, I believe it was a few years back at the Values Voters Summit, which now just seems like a cruel joke in light of his subsequent behavior. But he gave this speech and I was completely in his thrall. I was like, oh my goodness, why don't we nominate this guy? This guy's fantastic. And this was, I don't know, a decade ago or so. I forget how long ago it was. And just the most impressive speech I ever heard by a Republican or any politician anywhere. And then he does that thing a few years later where he runs off with his mistress and lies to his press people. And then he comes back and runs for Congress. It's just like, and then he's like, all is forgiven. Let's run for president.
You know, I saw him give a really impressive speech at a topless beach in Brazil. I mean, it wasn't so much of a speech as it was him hitting on one of the local girls. But still, I thought it was a very impressive talk.
No. That's not a thing that happened. Okay, so this is the situation. See, we have this meeting every week. I'm Scott Ott. The guy just got done talking with Stephen Green, and the guy who hasn't said anything yet is Bill Whittle. And we do this show that we've been doing for nigh on 150 years. That has been a 3-man panel news discussion show, generously seeded with humor and misinformation. And since we do this about 5 days a week, our members only can see this episode. So if you're one of our new members, howdy. Hi. Welcome. Howdy. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate your contribution to this enterprise, and you're now getting to see something that only the elite, the 1% of the 1% get to watch this. Not by design. We'd wish a lot more people would watch. But this is just the way it is, so you can feel like you're part of some sort of exclusive group. And we are going to kick around some ideas for stories for this week's episode of Right Angle, and then ultimately decide that we're going to do whatever we damn well please.
Yeah.
And so because Bill actually gets to host 2 episodes this week out of a great show of generosity unto me, that we're going to let him go first, just in case one of us was planning to steal one of his topics.
Well, the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall was on November 9th. Yeah. And I saw a New York Times article that explained in great detail how the whole thing was a complete accident, had nothing to do with good or evil. It had nothing to do with anything, really. Apparently somebody made a phone call that wasn't supposed to be made, and there it goes. So no mention of Ronald Reagan in this process, no mention of tear down the wall, no mention of none of it. It was just simply, oops, looks like a guy dialed the wrong number, said the gate was closed, turns out it was open, and then the wall came down, and nothing here, move along.
So this is this thing where there's a guy who's like an East German general or something, or a government official misread a statement that was supposed to say that the gates are going to be closed, but instead he said the gates are going to be open. Is that what you're talking about?
It's I don't know the details, but it's something like that. But my point is that they made it clear in a box quote. You know, it's like, this wasn't a triumph of good over evil. This was basically an accident. And the guy who stood there. Yeah, and the guy who stood there and said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, does not appear in that article that I'm aware of.
You know, so it's like there's a conspiracy going on here. Vox published something similar a couple of days ago, and so did the Daily Beast just yesterday, saying that the Cold War was just a huge mistake, that we dropped the atom bomb on Japan as a warning to Stalin, and that the Soviet Union was just crippled and dysfunctional and ready to collapse the entire time, and that everything we did was wrong.
That's the left-wing viewpoint.
Yeah, they've got to piss all over our victory. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. I hate that expression when the Cold War ended. It didn't end. We won. We knocked them in the dirt.
Yeah, and it couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of people. Just in this history I'm writing now, I just got to the execution of Beria. And that was the end of the terror, but everybody involved with Stalin. There's not a person in Stalin's Politburo who personally didn't sign thousands, if not tens or even hundreds of thousands of death warrants. The whole system was based on murder and terror. And that just doesn't seem to be covered by the left-wingers because if you tell that part of the story, people will start asking questions that they don't want to have answered. So... yeah,
so
nothing.
Now, the way I understand it from reading the mainstream media is the Berlin Wall actually fell over toward the east because West Germans were trying to rush to get into there to enjoy their fine food and their good governance. Ain't
nobody ever got shot climbing over the Berlin Wall to get into East Germany. And just the and then the person who wrote the article at the Times, I went and looked up her most recent articles, and it's like far right extremists, and then far right extremists here. The world consists of nothing but her and all of her friends and far right extremists. But it was the far right extremists like Ronald Reagan and Peter Robinson who wrote the speech. And he told me directly in an interview. He said, I got there a couple days before Reagan, and I just was asking around, and I just said to Berliners, who I knew casually or barely at all, does this wall intrude on your life? Is it as a part of your daily horizon? And every single one of them said, we have relatives that live 100 yards away from us that we haven't seen in 30 years.
Wow. Yeah.
And of course it does. It's in our lives every single day.
And they also ignore the complete broader picture, which is because of Reagan's push, because of this calling an evil empire, that things started to loosen up in Hungary and also in Czechoslovakia, and they stopped enforcing their borders like they had been. People were leaving Hungary into Austria, and so East Germans suddenly were taking all these vacations down to Hungary and slipping across the border there. So it got to the point where the wall was no longer defensible because that's not where the leak was anymore. And this is because of Reagan.
Well, yeah, it is because of Reagan, and to hear the left talk about the Cold War, as far as they're concerned, it's just like Coke versus Pepsi. Two countries more or less equally evil, more or less equally determined on world domination, each armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons. And I guess just because of the way the coin landed, it turned out that the United States won that one. But when you have to build a wall to keep your own people in, and your number one threat to your own country is that your people will leave and join the enemy, these are not equivalent philosophies, and they're not equivalent systems. And I'm just sick and tired of reading this kind of crap. So I thought I would bring that to people's attention.
Love it.
So that'll be the W show. And then
I wonder how many more, anniversary celebrations it would take them to actually get people. I guess they're just waiting for us to die.
Anybody with memories,
people to believe that. Yeah, if you weren't alive at the time and you don't realize the momentous nature of the event, I mean, hey, all you schmucks who are holding pieces of the Berlin Wall, that you broke off a little fragment, and all those museums that have sections of the Berlin Wall that are on display to mark a great moment in history, you're just taking up space that you could be using to, display some sort of performance artist getting naked and defecating on a cow.
And
I just created that argument in my head.
And the left is just, this is exactly what they do. But I just did some quick figuring, and the Cold War encompassed 6 of the 7 Soviet leaders. Lenin was the only one who wasn't actually inside the brackets of the Cold War, and 9 U.S. presidents. So 6 Soviet leaders, 9 U.S. presidents in various and sundry combinations. And this idea that the whole thing was a misunderstanding was just a kind of a whoop. Whoa, I feel so silly now. I thought you were trying to kill me this whole time, and all those countries you invaded and stuff. I took that seriously. What a nut I must have been. This kind of moral equivalence is what the left needs to survive, and I'm just sick of it. And I just wanted to bring that one up.
Yeah. What was the year, Bill, that that the tear down the wall speech was made? Do you happen to know that offhand?
1986,
I want
I
to say it
believe.
was okay. Good man. He knows better than I do.
Because what I'm thinking is, like, I remember that as being a great moment in history. But I think by '86, I think I was still pretty much on the left side of the aisle.
Me too. I thought when Reagan walked out of Reykjavik, I thought it was the end of the world. I thought that was our last chance.
I was wrong.
Yet,
it was June 12, 87. I just looked it up.
87. And yet I distinctly remember that moment as being a great moment, So even though I wasn't a cheerleader and I actually was kind of an antagonist of President Reagan, I wrote a satirical letter to the White House during his stay, and I sent him a column from the New York Times of somebody making fun of him. I mailed it to the White House, so there's a whole dossier on me somewhere there. But but even then, I knew this is something big. This means something.
Yeah. I was raised basically by Goldwater Republicans. You could probably still pretty much fairly call me one today. Libertarianish at home and defense hawks abroad. And so I, just grew up a Cold War kid. Jimmy Carter was the worst, Reagan was the best and all that. But I had a kind of a privileged seat for what was going on in East Germany in November of '89. I was a 20-year-old kid. I was working at a radio station, KXGO, in Arcata, California, that was an ABC News affiliate. And so we were getting the raw news feed live from ABC News into our production booth. And anytime somebody wasn't in there cutting commercials or something, for a week, I was I was planted in that production booth listening to the live ABC News feed, and it was remarkable. I mean, you had artists going up with little chisels and just hammering out their little piece off the top of the wall. It was just
or with their bloody bare hands.
Yeah.
So it was, but it wasn't a triumph of good over evil. That would be obviously a very simplistic way to look at something that was much more.
The wall materialized of its own will.
That's right.
Yeah. And so, dematerialized of its own.
That's
will.
the W show. And then the formerly members only show I saw on Drudge, where basically it's going to be welcome to Los Angeles. Your pod is ready. That no one can afford to pay apartment rents, and so now in the space of one apartment, they're putting in 6 pods. Yeah. These things are big enough to crawl into. You can't stand up in them. They've got a bed. There's some privacy. There's a place to hang some stuff, and then there's a communal kitchen and bathroom and all the rest of that stuff.
Is there enough room to podcast within them?
The pods rent for $750 a month.
Good Lord.
Gee whiz.
That's the pod. Have you priced pods lately in LA? It's just nuts. And that's
your
basically
own pod people joke here.
I'm going to take that and I'm going to combine it with what I just see every night now, and more people with tents underneath freeway overpasses in California. And the thing that's disturbing about this is a very, very different kind of homeless people. Very different. We're seeing a great many people in their 20s. White men and women in their 20s, perfectly healthy. None of them are either dying of alcoholism or have their brain fried by drug abuse or any of that stuff. These are perfectly capable people who have just decided that they're going to live underneath the freeway overpass in a tent.
As a lifestyle choice, or because they can't find a pod?
Clearly, they're clearly. I don't think anybody makes a decision like, "Hey, I want to go and live under a bridge," but at the same time, given how this economy is booming, they're not exactly willing to take any work either. I think, if I had to guess, I would say that they're people who are unwilling to take certain kind of jobs. And if they don't get the jobs that they want, then they're willing to just go pitch a tent someplace. That's what it looks like to me as I drive by every single day.
Did you see the video? One of your local news stations there in LA did a short clip. They posted it on Twitter of a woman who had a homeless guy throw a hot bucket of his own diarrhea on her.
Oh. That's my town. Welcome to LA. That's California, folks. That's democratic governance, and you can take that to the bank.
You know, I don't.
That was on video? That was video?
Not of the incident. It was an interview with her. But it was interspersed with security camera clips of the homeless guys just assaulting people. One guy just at random pushed a civilian, that's the term I'm going to use, out into the street where his head fell into the wheel well of a moving car. It just
killed him, obviously.
It didn't say. It was just a promotional clip. You know, watch tonight at 9 or whatever.
Well,
yeah, they're not going to tell you that. I hate that. Even on local news, they're like, something horrible happened to one of your neighbors. Wait for 3 hours to find out what.
Yeah.
Like, that's just evil. So, you know, I feel like, Bill, we should, I don't know how to do this, but maybe we should do a show, a series, maybe just to say from time to time, the reason why these kinds of things get our attention and our stories is because they're not typical. Like, this is not America the way America should be. This is not what happens in
but it's where it's heading.
Yeah. And
it's where it's heading.
Yes. And I'm not saying to gloss over it or look at it through rose-colored glasses. Like, you know, my old journalism professor, John Nichols, used to quote somebody as saying, news is coups, earthquakes, and three-legged chickens. Now, I'll take some three-legged chickens about now rather than buckets of diarrhea being thrown on people.
Who doesn't want the extra drumstick?
But it's like, because our attention is drawn to these things, it makes them seem like they're normative. Like, this is the way life is all the time in you know, it's coming to a neighborhood near you.
But they're becoming normative, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
It's all becoming normative here in this democratic bastion of governance. So those are what I want to do.
Well,
somebody stole a pumpkin from a porch in my neighborhood the other night.
Did they really?
Yeah, that's what it's like here.
Crime wave.
Love it.
But we have them on camera because everybody has one of those Ring video camera things. And so I see it because I'm on the Ring network. And so I actually saw the guy with his hoodie picking up a pumpkin and like walking on. He's on camera, you know, and these cameras have like night vision, so you can see them pretty well. And he's picking up and walking away with a pumpkin.
Now, I installed a couple of security cameras in our place. They're wired through Ethernet downstairs, but instead of it going through to Amazon servers where everybody can see it, I've got a little DVR downstairs with the rest of my network gear, and I can just pull up that video whenever I like. It's kind of cool. I can watch the dogs and the kids and stuff.
Yeah, I'd be a little nervous about having one of those cameras inside my house. I'm okay with it pointing away from my house.
Yeah, we'd have to do a serious rethink on Pantsless Thursdays.
Well, yeah, that's true. We don't have any low-slung cameras around here. So, Stephen Green, what is the topic that you're about to steal from me?
Well, I don't mean to hop on the California's going to hell bandwagon, but
oh, no,
I'm totally gonna. I'm totally gonna.
Room.
Yeah, except we're gonna venture a little further north, where San Francisco.
Is there a DA involved in this?
Is what involved?
Is there a DA involved in this?
There is a DA involved
candidate?
in this. Chesa Boudin, just elected San Francisco's district attorney. Now, if you were to name California, if you were to name San Francisco's most pressing criminal problems, you would probably name aggressive panhandlers, outdoor pooping and urination, outdoor drug use, burglary of cars are probably the big 4 or 5, however many I just said. And the new incoming DA's promise is to not prosecute any of those at all. They come to his desk, and
that's how crime. That's how you make crime go away.
They go
you
in
just
the
don't have any
file.
laws, and then the criminals are just we don't have any criminals.
You don't want to stigmatize that kind of behavior because it is a cultural artifact of a particular group of people, the poor and the homeless.
Except,
and so, go ahead.
I think this guy has extremely sinister ambitions. Do you know who he is?
The first time
He's
I ever
a
heard his
former
name was
Weather
today.
Underground, right?
Okay, well, his parents were, maybe you may have heard of them, David Gilbert and Kathy Boudin. They were both sentenced to very long prison terms. The father, David Gilbert, is still in jail for 3 murders involving the 1981 Brinks robbery. They were part of the whole getaway thing in order to fund the terrorist Weather Underground. So those are Boudin's parents. He was raised, because he was born just about a year before the Brinks robbery and his parents getting arrested for 3 counts of felony murder. He was raised instead, get this, by Weather Underground leaders Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn.
This is essentially the adopted child of Bill Ayers.
Bill Ayers, that's right.
Wow.
His first big gig before attending law school was to serve as Hugo Chavez's translator and living in the presidential palace down there in Venezuela. He served as a law clerk for a variety of left-wing judges. He served as a public defender and is waging a war against bail and public criminality. It's
That's how you solve the crime problem. You just don't make anything. You just make everything legal.
Just
crime
ignore
problem's
it. Yeah.
done.
That is exactly the thinking, Bill. I mean, I know you're being facetious, but that is what they're thinking.
Of course.
Part of the problem with the United States of America is so many people are in jail, so many people have been charged with crimes, and so the government has turned millions of people into criminals. Whereas if we did not arrest them and never, proceeded against them with a law enforcement action, then we'd
Crime
have
problem gone.
far fewer criminals in this country.
That's absolutely right.
Yes.
I swear to God, San Francisco and California, it's almost like, you've got Moses standing there with a flaming staff and waters boiling beneath him and frogs falling out of the sky. And he's standing there saying, go no further. And people are saying, get out of my way, old man. And just pushing him, into the mud. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah. Well, I think what's really going to happen here, I mean, San Francisco is just, these problems are already endemic. Now it's going to get worse. The police are just going to stop doing pretty much anything. I'd be surprised if various police weren't planning to move to other departments or out of the state now. It's just going to be impossible. And I think I'd also like to talk about the broken windows theory of policing.
Yes,
which
that's very good.
Rudy Giuliani
By the way,
brought to New York City in the mid 90s. And this is the opposite of that. This is the non-policing theory of policing.
I'd love to talk about the broken windows
All right, well,
thing.
I'll set you up for that, Bill. And
Thank you.
Scott, I'll give you the child of terrorists angle.
I'm guessing that, along with Bill's reference to Moses, that this San Francisco district attorney also has a flaming staff.
Jeez.
Well played, young man.
So,
Gonna
okay,
part
ladies
the
and
Red
gentlemen. So
Sea of urine.
here's let me get my bespectacled. Oh my goodness, there's a giant smudge on my glasses. I can't see a thing through them.
Just a silly little domestic thing while you're doing that. I don't know how this happened, other than the fact that, I shoot cameras all the time, and so I have this unofficial job of cleaning the optics in the house. Mm-hmm. But whenever my wife has a smudge on her glasses, even though she is a perfectly capable woman, I get the glasses and the cleaning rag handed to me. Could you fix this, please? Okay. I'm in charge of optics.
I typically clean my glasses on my wife's blouse. So I'll just reach over and go, hey, do you mind if here we go.
Just, there you go.
Okay. I still can't get that smudge out of there. So here's my story. The Supreme Court has just announced that it is not going to stand in the way of a lawsuit that has been filed by a group of parents of the Sandy Hook school shooting victims who are suing Remington Arms because their advertising, their marketing targeted particular people and took a particular approach to that advertising that makes them culpable, at least in part, for what happened at Sandy Hook. And this Supreme Court, which, with several new justices appointed by, or at least 2 appointed by President Trump, has basically decided not to stand in the way of that after the Connecticut Supreme Court ruled 4-3 that Remington Arms can be sued by this group.
Yeah. Just because the court allows a suit to go through doesn't mean they're taking any sides in the lawsuit. They're just saying the Supreme Court may or may not have any standing to rule on this kind of suit going forward.
Which will eventually get to their doors.
I'm sure it will.
And I'm not really making a judgment about the Supreme Court so much as the whole idea that a manufacturer, not just by the nature of what they make, because that's not the case that's being made here. The case is not that, hey, you make assault weapons, and so therefore you're partially responsible. What they're saying is much in the way that the cigarette industry was attacked. You are marketing these things to young people. You are marketing them to a particular kind of young people, the sort of loner who wants to be master of the universe. You are marketing them through channels that would foster and find those kinds of people. And the approach that you took in your marketing makes what might otherwise not be a judiciable case into something that, or justiciable, or whatever the word is, that makes it now something that you can be sued over.
So if I buy a sports car and the advertising for a sports car is geared towards people like me, and then I go out and kill some people by running them over with my sports car, I can sue the car company because they advertised a sports car to me. Is that the argument?
Partially, but it goes further than that.
It's
almost like they imply that you could take that sports car and dominate any crowd of pedestrians with it.
Well, what would be the point of owning such a car if you couldn't do that?
So anyway,
the way I drive, stay off the sidewalk.
I just think this is a fascinating case with broad implications, especially if it proceeds, if the plaintiffs are successful. And the whole time you're thinking, wow, what a horrible, horrible thing to have happen to you and to your family, to lose your child in such grisly circumstances so abruptly and so, like I'm reluctant to just lash out at somebody who's filing this lawsuit. I think that there is something inherent in the human heart that says somehow we must get justice for this. And that expression of justice can't just be that some crazy kid, commits suicide or goes to jail. Somebody must be made to pay, not just financially, but to right the balances of justice. Somebody has to be punished for this in a major way.
All right.
I'd like to see one of these ads.
For the
I
haven't seen the ads.
I ever see for firearms are flyers I get in the mail from the local range where I'm a member, and there's just pictures of handguns and rifles and new low price. There's no amaze your friends with your mass murder potential or anything like that.
No, it's more like, hey, do you have enough guns yet? No?
Yeah, no.
We sell guns. Why don't you come to our place so you can get one or
they
two?
They know their market. I'm right.
That's
here.
right. Yeah, it's like the heavy user. It's like the people who already have guns are the best people to sell guns to. Like they probably don't even advertise at all to the people who don't own guns yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at, what's my Glock 19 is a Gen 3, and I'm looking at the Gen 4, and it's like, well, it's I think I like the color better, and that grip looks like, it could be like 15% grippier. I need it.
Anyway, so it's essentially marketing at the bar here. It's like it's a speech issue in a sense. The marketing of a product can make you culpable if somebody does something that clearly you never intended them to do, but it can be made to seem like you did.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's it. So this episode of Backstage for Right Angle was brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com, and we are going to proceed to produce these episodes this week. For those of you who have been paying attention, you probably know that you can now hear every episode of Bill Whittle Now, every episode of Right Angle, with the exception of the Backstage episodes, on our podcast now, which you can get on Apple, on your Android device, on SoundCloud, on Stitcher, the Stitcher app, and any other podcast app, like Podcast Addict is one of the most popular ones. All you have to do is search for it on those apps, or go to the website at billwhittle.com, click the podcast link, and copy that RSS feed for our podcast into it. We also post it, by the way, in every Facebook post that we do about our new videos, as well as every YouTube video. So if you haven't found it yet, I think you're really going to enjoy the opportunity. I know some of our members, we produce a lot of content here, and some of our members, frankly, don't have time to see all of it. But if you could hear some of it and watch other parts of it, then you may actually be able to catch up. So we're trying to enhance your binge watching. We're grateful to the members who not only binge watch but pay for other people to do so. So for Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. See you this week on Right Angle.